Hey, good morning. Shalom, shalom. Well, Lord. Hey, I wanted to do a video before it get too hot out here. It's already starting to creep up out here, this heat. Well, we just pray, Father God, that you would, that you would take this heat away from us. I don't know what them scientists up there got going on with these satellites and all this heat, but y'all need to cut that out. We know they got them satellites up there to control the weather modification satellites. So that's what y'all got going on with this heat, man. Y'all need to cut that out. This heat ain't no joke. But Father Yah is in control. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Father Yah is in control. May he bring some shade over us, Father Yah, and quench our land with some rain. Hallelujah. Man, hope y'all have a blessed day today. Hope y'all have a blessed day today. Wanted to go ahead and get into this book of Maccabees again, where we left off in chapter 10. So chapter 10, book of Maccabees. Hold on, give me a second. All right. So first book of Maccabees, chapter 10. I'm on. So if I had started recording on the other on my other GoPro, but it get too hot, and that GoPro gets too hot sometime, man, and it be that's why I just rather just record it on this sometime. You know, if I'm inside, it's all good, but that GoPro, hey, that thing get hot trying to do video recording. And but if you got this book, I'm in the Joseph Lunkin Apocrypha. I know they got the who else make it? Man, what's the other dude's name? I forgot the other dude's name. There's a whole lot of apocryphas out there with the same word. Just make sure, you know, I like this one, and I forgot the other dude's name, version. But this guy's a vet. It's a military vet to put the scriptures of this one together in one book. So, and or you can get the Sefer, which you know, y'all coming into this truth, man, and starting to learn your Hebrew roots. I recommend getting the Sefer Bible, man, because the Sefer Bible got all the books that you got, plus all these books, in one book. So it's a big book. You know what I'm saying? It's a big book. With all the missing books, I think it got 80 something books in it. We know there's 94 books, and the Ethiopic Bible holds 81 of them. So I think the Sefer holds about 81 or so of the books. So I think they online for about $1.25. So I know that's kind of steep for a Bible, but hey, if you want the Hebrew version of the Bible and not this Greek, Latin, you know, Edomite version, well, not this one, well, this one too, but like the regular Holy Bible, you want to get back to the real names of Yehoshua and Yah, the real name of the Father and the Son, and the real names of the prophets, and start to learn your Hebrew roots. I recommend getting the Sefer. Now you can get a regular Sefer that has the same Old Testament and New Testament with the Hebrew names and the Hebrew words in it. You know, so it's Hebrew and English, so you can understand it. So you can get that one about $28. I got that one, and I'm gonna save up and get that $125 one, so I can have it all in one book. Now, that book probably about this big. I mean, it's a big book. Something you ain't gonna want to run around with in your hand with too much, you know. But anyway, that to save you from having to go and buy, you know, the Apocrypha and buying the other books, the Shepherd of Hermes and all that kind of stuff, and spending all the extra money on that. So all that stuff come in one book, which is what they should have did in the first place. But anyway, the same people who decided to take it out is the same ones who sold us into slavery in the first place. The same ones, the Roman Catholic Church. The same ones who lied to us and told us his name was JC when that name wasn't around but 500 years ago, around the time we went into slavery. At the same time that they baptized us and put that cross in our face and said, this is your Lord, this is your God, and sent us from Africa to the slave ship, sent us to our death. Okay? So them same people are the one who decides what can go in the book and what can't go in the book. And if they supposed to be our enemies, then guess what? Half the books they took out of there got the information that you need so you can figure out the book that you got in your hand today. So, and that's why they spread that lie. Well, you shouldn't read that because the Catholic churches didn't canonize it. And these same pagan, demonic Edomites run around here, sold us into slavery, and persecuted us with their Christianity, and told us lies all these years, got us running around here trying to send praises through to the Most High, and we don't even know his name. Man, I don't believe nothing them cats tell me. Hey, they are the synagogue of Satan. But anyway, let's read on. We in 1 Maccabees chapter 10, and we're going to get into this because, hey, this is interesting because Jonathan, you know, he took over as high priest for the Israelites after his brother Judas had got killed in battle against the Greeks. Okay, and during that time he had, while he was, you know, trying to regain his, gather his people again, he went to the Jordanians, the Moabites and the Ammonites, and they ended up robbing him. They robbed him of all his goods and stuff and killed one of his brethren, John. So they, the Israelites, they went into Petra, you know, where they found the little rocks and caves and stuff now, in the land of Petra in Jordan, and they slew them cats. Oh yeah, they got all their stuff back, and then some. See, us Israelites, you know, we ain't play that mess back in the day. You come against our family, our brother, we slew you. Hey, you got slew with the help of Yah. So, hey, so now the Greeks was on the run because guess what? The Greeks got to go fight the Romans because we know that the Roman Empire, their fourth kingdom, is going to take over the Greek Empire, or the Seleucid Empire, from the reigns of King Antiochus of Ephes. So now this is where we at in the Bible, the beginning of the Roman Empire and the Potomac Empire in Egypt, with Cleopatra in them. So let's read on here. It says in the 100 verse 1, 1 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 1. If you're on this book, I'm on page 107. If not, I'm on 1 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 1. It says in the 160th year, Alexander Ephames, the son of Antiochus, King Antiochus IV, the first Antichrist in the land, the Greek Edomites, landed and occupied Potomac. Now Potomac was in Egypt, okay, in Africa, okay. So this is how you get all these other light-skinned pharaohs and all this other stuff, because who was landing up in there? Huh? The Greeks. The Greeks landed in there. The Greeks landed in there. Because in the first Maccabees chapter 1, it says they invaded with King Antiochus, the first Antichrist, the Greek, the sinful root, the Antichrist, invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants, and the cavalry with a large fleet. And he engaged Ptolemy, king of Egypt, in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him. So they took over Egypt. Okay? So they started mixing and mingling their seed with us at the time. Well, not with us, but with the Hamites in Egypt at the time. the Egyptians. So before that, Egypt was black. So Egypt was black before the Greeks and the Romans started mixing and mingling in Egypt and Africa. Okay? So it says, and they welcomed him, and he began. It says Alexander Ephanes, the son of Antiochus, landed and occupied Ptolemais, and they welcomed him, and he began to reign. And when Demetrius the king heard of it, he assembled a very large army and marched out to meet him in battle. It says, and Demetrius sent Jonathan a letter and peaceable words to honor him. For he said, let us act first to make peace with him before he makes peace with Alexander against us. For he will remember all the wrongs which we did to him and to his brother and his nations. Because remember, Demetrius and Antiochus and them, they went in there slaying the Israelites because they didn't keep their Sunday laws. They changed the Sabbath to their Sunday laws, and they took their tithes and offering and killed the Jews that wouldn't worship the image of the beast, the image of the first Antichrist, King Antiochus. And it sold some of them into slavery and killed the women and children and burned their temple and all that. So here you had the Greeks going there like, hey, let's send the words. We try to make peace with them because, hey, we see the Romans, they trying to come up against us. They trying to come up against us and take over Egypt and all the lands that we got. So, verse 6, it says, so Demetrius gave him authority to recruit troops and equip them with arms to become his ally. And he commanded them that the hostages in the citadel should be released to him. Then Jonathan came to Jerusalem and read the letter, and in the hearing of all the people and the men in the citadel. And they were greatly alarmed when they heard that the king had given him authority to recruit troops. It says, but the men in the citadel released the hostages to Jonathan, and he returned them to their parents. And Jonathan dwelt in Jerusalem and began to rebuild and restore the city. And he directed those who were doing the work to build the walls and encircle Mount Zion with squared stones for better fortification, and they did so. And the foreigners who were in their strongholds that Maccabees had built fled. So Maccabees was one of the Greeks that was in their strongholds at the time, and they citadel, so they fled. It says, and each left his place and departed to his own land. And only in Bethzur did some remain who had forsaken the law and the commandments, for it served as a place of refuge. So the people who remained, who forsaken the law and the commandments, was the Hellenized Jews. The same ones that tried to come up to be high priests and got slain, that the Lord slain. Remember, he slew, what was his name? It wasn't Maccabees, it was, what's his name? What was that boy name he slew? I don't know. One of the Hellenized Jews is in here. I had to go through find it. Alchemist, that's what it was. Alchemist. He was one of the Hellenized Jews. He wanted to come up as high priest. So he wanted to start just trying to destroy the wall in Jerusalem. And Yah cursed him. He flicked them. He flicked them with flicked him bad where he couldn't even move, where he couldn't move his body or nothing until he died. Because he tried to tear down the wall and got him on about the way. But the rest of the Hellenized Jews that followed him, they took refuge in Beth Zor. That's what it says, for it served as a place of refuge. In verse 15 it says, now Alexander the king heard all the promises which Demetrius had sent to Jonathan, and men told him of the battles that Jonathan and his brothers had fought, of the brave deeds that they had done, and of the troubles that they had endured. So he said, shall we find another such man? A man who could do all this great stuff with battles? Because he had Elohim on his side. He said, come now, we will make him our friend and our ally. So the Romans said, come on, man, let's make Jonathan our friend and ally, because, hey, we heard all the battles he done fought. Him and the Israelites had fought against the Greeks and tore they behind up. So the Romans said, hey, let's make allies with them. But remember, in the last video, Jonathan went up to Rome to the council in what they called the kind of like Congress at the time, and asked for a peace deal. They was trying to make a peace deal with them. And they made a peace agreement with the Romans at first. Okay? So here you go, King Alexander. He trying to get ahead of the Greeks. And the Greeks were scared, because the Greeks had said, we want to make peace with them, but they can remember all that slavery and raping and pillaging and us killing them. So they may not want to make peace with us. So, verse 17 says, and he wrote a letter and sent it to him in the following words. King Alexander to his brother Jonathan, greeting. We have heard about you, that you are a mighty warrior and worthy to be our friend. It says, so we have appointed you today to be high priest, to be the high priest of your nation. And you are to be called the king's friend. And he sent him a purple robe and a golden crown. And you are to take our side and keep friendship with us. So that's all the Romans sent him, was a purple robe and a crown. The same purple robe and the crown of thorns that they put on Yehoshua's head when they scourged him, the Romans. It says, so Jonathan put on the holy garments in the 17th month of the 160th year, at the Feast of Tabernacles, and he recruited troops and equipped them with arms in abundance. Now when Demetrius heard of these things, he was grieved and said, what is this that we have done? What is this that we have done? Alexander have gotten ahead of us in forming a friendship with the Jews to strengthen himself. Because at this point, the Greeks was on the run from who? The Jews and the Romans. It says in verse 24, it says, I will also write them words of encouragement and promise them honor and gifts, that I may have their help. So after they enslaved us and burned our temple and erected the image of Zeus in the temple of Elohim, and took our tithes and offerings from the Levites, and sold our women and children into slavery and bondage, now they want our help because the Romans after them. Come on, man. It's kind of like what they did today. Like what's going on over here. After all this raping and murder and pillaging and slavery over here, now they want our help. Well, what happened to nothing there in 9/11? Huh? All them white people were scared, man, and guess what? They were looking at the brothers. Oh, help us, help us. Now they want our help. Huh? Like we forgot. Let's see what the Jews did to the people who did all this to them back in the day. Which really we should take note today, because the same stuff that happened to them really happened to us here. So it says. So he said, so he sent a message to them in the following words. King Demetrius, to the nation of the Jews, greeting. Says, since you have kept your agreement with us and have continued your friendship with us, and have not sided with our enemies, we have heard it and rejoice. It says, and now continue to keep faith with us, and we will repay you with good for what you do for us. And we will grant you many immunities and give you gifts. And now I free you and exempt all the Jews from payment of tribute and salt tax and crown levies. It says, and instead of collecting the third of the grain and the half of the fruit of the trees that I should receive, I release them from this day and henceforth. And I will not collect them from the land of Judah, or from the 3 districts added to it from Samaria and Galilee, and from this day and for all time. So from this day and for all time, I mean, hey, the Jews ain't even supposed to be paying the Greeks nothing. Nada. No salt tax, no crown levies, nothing. It says, verse 31 says, and let Jerusalem and her Eberons and her tithes and her revenues be holy and free from tax. It says, and I release all my control from the citadel in Jerusalem. Now notice this is the Greeks saying all this. This ain't the Romans. You remember, Yehoshua told the Jews during the time he was on the earth, running around, he said, pay tribute. He said, pay tribute with Caesar's. Get a Caesar with Caesar. Get a Yah what's Yah's. Now he said, I release all my control of the citadel in Jerusalem and give it to the high priest, that he may station it in men of his own choice to guard it. And every one of the Jews taken as a captive from the land of Judah into any part of my kingdom, I set free without payment. I set free without payment. And let all officials cancel all the taxes on their cattle. Man. So they ain't had to pay nothing to get them out of slavery. It says, in all the feasts and Sabbaths and new moons and appointed days, and the 3 days before a feast and the 3 days after a feast, let them all be days of immunity and release for all the Jews who are in my kingdom. So these were supposed to be days of immunity and release for all the Jews who were in prison on the feast days, Sabbaths, new moons, and appointed days. Which is similar to what the Romans were doing to Barabbas. Remember, because he said during the Passover, the Roman custom was to let a prisoner go, or what have you. Something similar to this effect. It says, and no one shall have authority to exact anything from them or ignore any of them about any matter. It says, let the Jews be enrolled in the king's forces to the number of 30,000 men, and let the maintenance be given them that is due to all the forces of the king. It says, and let some of them be stationed in the great strongholds of the king, and let some of them be put into positions of trust in the kingdom. Sounds all good, huh? It says, let their officers and leaders be of their own number, and let them live by their own laws, just as the king had commanded in the land of Judah. It says, as for the 3 districts that have been added to Judea from the country of Samaria, the Samaritans, them so-called good Samaritans, who are what? Confederate with Ephraim and Syria against the house of Judah. It says, let them be so annexed to Judea that they are considered to be under one ruler and obey no other authority but the high priest. It says, Ptolemais and the land adjoining it, meaning Egypt, or in Africa, and the land adjoining it, I have given as a gift to the sanctuary in Jerusalem, to meet the necessary expenses of the sanctuary. And I also grant 15,000 shekels of silver yearly out of the king's revenues from appropriate places. and all additional funds which the government officials have not paid, as they did in the first years, they should give from now on for the service of the temple. And moreover, 5,000 shekels of silver, which my officials have received every year from the income of the service of the temple. So you mean to tell me these Greeks was they were robbing Levi. They were robbing Levi 15,000 shekels. 5,000 shekels of silver every year from the temple. And who had the commandment to receive tithes and offerings? The Levites. The Levites. But he's saying that the Greeks had it. They received it every year from the income of the service of the temple. It says, this too is counsel, because it belongs to the priests who ministered there. And who was the priest that ministered in the temple? The Levites. Man, y'all sitting there robbing Levites, just like they're doing today. Still robbing Levites. Sitting up all these synagogues everywhere talking about, give me all your money. It says, and whosoever takes refuge at the temple of Jerusalem or any of its precincts, because he owes money to the king or has any debt, let him be released and receive back all his property in my kingdom. And now let the cost of rebuilding and restoring the structures of the sanctuary be paid from the revenues of the king. Verse 45, it says, and let the cost of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem and fortifying it round about, and the cost of rebuilding the walls in Judea also be paid from the revenues of the king. Now when Jonathan and the people heard these words, they did not believe or accept them, because they remembered the great wrongs which Demetrius had did in Israel, and how he had greatly oppressed them. Ain't that what they did to us? In the days of the first Antichrist, the Greek Edomite King Antiochus went in there, burning the temple, robbing Levi, the tithes and offerings, changing the Sabbath day to the Sunday laws to worship Zeus, and then erected a graven image in the temple of Zeus. And then killed up all these Jews and fought against them, and the Israelites fought back and slew them with the help of Elohim. And Jonathan and the Israelites, they heard these words of these Greeks who was trying to suck up to them, because they was trying to, the Greeks was at war with Rome, and they ain't want Rome to be, to get their friendship of the Israelites before them. So they said, we're going to promise you all this gold and silver. We're going to promise you all these people going to be let free. Okay, we're going to give you your land. We're going to give you all this stuff, and you can come work for our army, and all this going on. And Jonathan and the Israelites, they heard that mess, and they said they did not believe it or accept it. And what they tell us to do here, get over it. So the same people that slayed the Israelites during the second temple, and they promised them freedom and all this other stuff, and they said, I don't believe him. The Israelites said, I don't believe him or accept it. We ain't forgot nothing. We ain't forgot nothing. It says because they remembered the great wrongs which Demetrius had done in Israel, and how he had greatly oppressed them, sent them into captivity and everything, killed them in the whole nine. And they say over here, y'all get over it. We at peace with you now, At least they offered to pay the Israelites back then. At least they offered to pay them. They ain't paid us jack. And then they say, well, y'all need to forget about it and get over it, because we at peace with you. And that's why y'all they say peace, peace, when there's no peace, healing the hurt of the daughter a little. Healing the hurt of the daughter of Zion a little bit. Y'all ain't forgot about that either. So I don't want y'all ever forget about it. Don't ever forget about what they did, because one, they ain't forgot about it. 2, they still doing it. And 3, they ain't paid us. The Israelites, our ancestors, they ain't forget about it. Nor did they believe that mess. Hey. Let's read on. Verse 47. So if you just join them in 1 Maccabees chapter 10, verse 47. Okay? It says, and they favored Alexander because he had been the first to speak peaceable words to them. So the Israelites, they favored the Romans, the Alexander, King Alexander. Okay? Because he had been the first to speak peaceable words to them. And they remained his allies all his days. Now Alexander the king assembled large forces and encamped opposite of Demetrius, King Demetrius. And the 2 kings met in battle. And the army of Demetrius fled, and Alexander pursued him and defeated them. So the Romans pursued the Greeks and defeated them. And he pressed the battle strongly until the sun set. And Demetrius fell on that day. So Demetrius died on that day. It says, then Alexander sent ambassadors to Ptolemy, king of Egypt, with the following message. Says, since I have returned to my kingdom, so the Romans sent the message to Ptolemy, the king of Egypt. Says, since I have returned to my kingdom and have taken my seat on the throne of my fathers and established my rule, for I crushed Demetrius and gained control of our country. It says, I met him in battle, and he and his army were crushed by us, and we have taken our seat on the throne of his kingdom. Now therefore let us establish friendship with one another. Give me now your daughter as my wife. So the Romans went down there to Egypt, was sent a word down to Egypt, the king of Egypt at the time, the Ptolemy, king of Egypt, the father of Cleopatra, and said, hey, let us make a deal, pretty much. Give me your daughter as my wife, and I will become your son-in-law, and will make gifts to you and to her in keeping with your position. So in order to keep your position, give me your daughter Cleopatra. Now, it says, Ptolemy the king replied and said, happy was the day on which you returned to the land of your fathers and took your seat on the throne of their kingdom. And now I will do for you as you wrote. But meet me at Ptolemais, so that we may see one another, and I will become your father-in-law, as you have said. So Ptolemy set out from Egypt, he and Cleopatra, his daughter, and came to Ptolemais in the 162nd year. And Alexander the king met him, and Ptolemy gave him Cleopatra, his daughter, in marriage, and celebrated her wedding at Ptolemais with great pomp as kings do. So they had a great celebration and wedding for the king of Rome and the daughter and Cleopatra, the daughter of King of Ptolemy of Egypt. It says, verse 59, it says, then Alexander the king wrote to Jonathan to come to meet him. So when the king, so he went with pomp to Ptolemais and met the 2 kings. And he gave them and their friends silver and gold and many gifts, and found favor with them. And it says, and a group of pestilent men from Israel, lawless men, gathered together against him to accuse him. But the king paid no attention to them. So these pestilent men, these lawless men of Israel, some of the Israelites, probably these Hellenized Jews, they went up there trying to accuse Ptolemy, the king of Egypt. And the king ain't paying no attention to him. It says the king gave orders to take off Jonathan's garments and to clothe him in purple as they did so. Because remember, the Hellenized Jews with Maccabees wanted to be the high priest in Israel. So they sold their own people to slavery. They sold some of their own people to the Greeks into slavery and captivity, and killed a lot of them too. So some of these same cats went up there to the Potomac, Egypt, when they heard that they was going to crown and give the purple robe to Jonathan and the Israelites, and said, oh, nah, we can't have that. But Jonathan, the king, said, I ain't paying attention to him. So he said, hey, he brought Jonathan garments and clothed him in purple, and they did so. Now, verse 63, it says, and the king also seated him at his side. And he said to his officers, go forth with him into the middle of the city and proclaim that proclaim that no one is to bring charges against him about any matter. So he said, and let no one annoy him for any reason. So this king of Egypt said, hey, go tell everybody that Jonathan, I'm sitting up here in this purple robe and this golden crown, nobody ain't supposed to mess with him at all or bring charges against him. Verse 64, it says, and when the accusers saw the honor that was paid to him in accordance with the proclamation and saw him clothed in purple, they all fled. So that tell you something, because these cats were some Israelites who was bearing false witness, and they was trying to accuse Jonathan and make false accusations, because they hated on him. They ain't want him to be high priest. They wanted Alchemius to be high priest, but he got killed because Yah killed him. Yah killed him. He trying to tear down the wall in Jerusalem and try to help the Greeks. Yah took him smooth up out of there. So hey, you gotta watch some of your own Israelite brothers too, because they like to hate on you too. Some of your own Israelites like to hate on each other, apparently. Now it says, thus the king honored him and enrolled him among his chief friends, and made him general and governor of the province. And now this wasn't the first time, because back in Genesis, I believe, or back in the book of Genesis, Joseph at the time who went down into Egypt after his brothers had threw him in the pit, and the Ishmaelites got him out the pit and sold him into the Egyptians, to the Pharaoh, and Pharaoh ended up making him what? Making him governor over the province, brother Joseph. And then all his brothers went down during the famine in the land of Canaan, went down to Egypt, and they didn't even know Joseph, their brother was down there, until, after a while they started, getting back together and whatnot. So the same thing pretty much, happened to Jonathan, but not in that instance. But Jonathan also became a governor of the province in Egypt, just like Joseph did. Verse 66, it says, and Jonathan returned to Jerusalem in peace and gladness. And in the 165th year, Demetrius, the son of Demetrius, because remember, Demetrius got killed, because the Romans killed Demetrius. Now the son of Demetrius came from Crete to the land of his fathers. So he went back into Greece, into Crete. And when King Alexander heard of it, he was greatly grieved and returned to Antioch. So we know Antioch is in the border of Syria and Iraq. The border of Syria and Iraq, Antioch, towards the ocean. It says, and Demetrius appointed Apollonius, the governor of Syria, and he assembled a large force and encamped against Jamnia. It says, then he sent the following message to Jonathan, the high priest. It says, you are the only one to rise up against us, and I have become a laughingstock and a reproach because of you. It says, why do you assume authority against us in the hill country? So the son of Demetrius, the Greek, he asked Jonathan, why are you the only one that rose up against us? And now because because of what you did to my father's fathers, I become a laughingstock and reproach. So why do you assume authority against us in the hill country? It says, if you now have confidence in your forces, come down to the plain to meet us, and let us match strength. Let us match strength with each other over there. For I have with me the power of the cities. So here we go again. Y'all Greeks ain't had enough of the butt women's that the Israelites put on them. So now they want to go mess with the Israelites, knowing good and well, hey, you got to worry about the Romans. Verse 72, it says, ask and learn who I am and who the others are that are helping us. Men will tell you that you cannot stand before us, for your fathers was twice put to flight in their own land. It says that now you will not be able to withstand my cavalry and such an army in the plain, where there is no stone or pebble or place to flee. So this cat was bold. Demetrius said, hey, all right, y'all come up out that hill country, because they didn't want to fight them in Israel, Jerusalem, because there was too many hills and mountains. So they said, let's go down to the plains where there ain't no rocks you could throw or nowhere you could go run and hide. Because you remember Jonathan and Mattathias and not Jonathan, but Mattathias and Judas, they did guerrilla warfare against the Greeks. They tried to run up in their spot. They hid up in the mountains. They was attacking them like Spartacus. You ever seen that movie Spartacus, or the show Spartacus? You know, I ain't giving credit to the show, because the show was some, you know, had a bunch of homosexuality and all this other stuff on it. But I ain't saying Jonathan was like Spartacus, but the way they did guerrilla warfare, they were putting it on them. They were putting them on them. So here comes Demetrius, the son of Demetrius. He got a little chip on his shoulder, because hey, he become a laughing stock. He said, hey, let's come down to the plain where what? Where he said where no rocks or stone could be thrown, where you can't hide at. Let's see what you gonna do then. Now 74, verse 74, it says, and when Jonathan heard the words of Apollonius, his spirit was aroused. His spirit was aroused, and he chose 10,000 men and set out from Jerusalem. And Simon, his brother, met him to help him. And he encamped before Joppa. But the men of the city closed its gates, for Apollonius had a garrison in Joppa. It says, so they fought against it, and the men of the city became afraid and opened the gates. And Jonathan gained possession of Joppa. So, hey, either you going to let us in, or we going to kick in the door. Basically. Now, verse 77 says, when Apollonius heard it, he mustered 3,000 cavalry. 3,000 cavalry and a large army. And went to Azotus, as though he were going farther. And at the same time he advanced into the plain, for he had a large troop of cavalry and put confidence in it. And Jonathan pursued him to Azotus, and the armies engaged in battle. Now Apollonius had secretly left 1,000 cavalry behind him, so he tried to do some strategic plotting and planning, maneuvering, you know, to try to outsmart old Jonathan. So he left 1,000 cavalry behind, and Jonathan learned that there was an ambush behind them. But they surrounded his army and shot arrows at his men from early morning to late afternoon. Verse 81, it says, but his men stood fast, as Jonathan commanded, and the enemy's horses grew tired. It says, then Simon brought forward his face and engaged the phalanx in battle, for the cavalry was exhausted. And they were overwhelmed by him and fled. And the cavalry was dispersed in the plain, and they fled to Azotus and entered Bet-Dagon, the temple of their idol, for safety. But Jonathan burned Azotus. He burned this city and the surrounding towns and plundered them. In the temple of Dagon, and those who had taken refuge in it, he burnt with fire. Jonathan wasn't playing. Hey, him and who was it? Jonathan and his brother before him, and Mattathias, they weren't no punk, man. They weren't no punk. Israelites were no punk. And we ain't gonna be no punk, cause we ain't gonna be no punk again, cause Yah showed us once he come bring us out the land of our captivity and put us back in our land, and all the nations gather up against the house of Israel, and Yah do battle against them. Man, he said we gonna put our hands on them Edomites. we gonna be great and strong. We gonna do battle again with Yah. He said we gonna put our hands on them. We gonna plunder them. We gonna take all their stuff pretty much. He said we're gonna be burying bodies. He said we're gonna be burying bodies for 7 months. We're gonna be burying bodies for 7 months. So he said y'all gonna bring down all the birds, and it's gonna be like blood everywhere, and they gonna eat the flesh off the bodies and the fat off the bodies, and all the weapons and guns and stuff. We're gonna be burning them for 7 years. It's in the Bible. It said for 7 years we're gonna be burying bodies and burning weapons for 7 years and 7 months. That's why y'all need to read y'all word, man. These people have you thinking we gonna be raptured and be up out of here. We're gonna go somewhere and dwell in peace and live in the land. We all gonna dwell in peace and all that. But it ain't, that's what he said. It's gonna be a great and terrible day. You can't have peace until all these people die first. There's gonna be a whole lot of people dying. Y'all said it. So there's gonna be a whole lot of people dying, and we're gonna be burying bodies for years, for 7 years, 7 months. We're gonna bury bodies and weapons. So when we get there, we got work to do. There ain't gonna be no sitting down, chilling, singing kumbaya. He said we got work to do, continuous work of burying bodies and weapons, and burning weapons. Hey. But anyway, let's get back to this story. So we want no punk then, and we ain't gonna be no punk now. You know. Verse 85, it says the number of those who fell by the sword were with those burned alive came to 8,000 men. 8,000 men fell by the sword and were burned alive. He didn't say burned after they fell. He said burned alive. Came to 8,000 men who tried to run up on the Israelites. Huh? It says, then Jonathan departed from there in the camp against Ashkelon, and the men of the city came out to meet him with great pomp. And Jonathan and those with him returned to Jerusalem with much booty. So they returned back to Jerusalem with what? All kind of silver, gold, all kind of stuff they got for the people that they just slaughtered. They wanted a war with Israel. They slaughtered and took all that they had, burned them alive, and slew them. 8,000 men got all their riches. He said we're gonna do the same thing when y'all come back. Hey, y'all better read the word, man. Verse 87. 88. Now, when Alexander the king heard of these things, he honored Jonathan still more, and he sent to him a golden buckle, such as it is the custom to give to the kinsmen of kings. And he also gave him Ekron and all its environs as his possession. First Maccabees chapter 11. Boy, that was a long chapter. Man, that was a long chapter. That was 89 verses. First Maccabees chapter 11. Let me see how long this is. Yeah. So yeah, I might get through 11 and then we might end it on 12, but this is long. This is like chapter 11 just as long. First Maccabees chapter 11. It says, and then the king of Egypt gathered great forces, like the sand by the seashore, and many ships. And he tried to get possession of Alexander's kingdom by trickery. So Ptolemy, the king of Egypt, after he done gave his daughter Cleopatra up to King Alexander, he tried to get possession of Alexander's kingdom by trickery. You know this ain't gonna end well. It says, and add it to his own kingdom. It says, so he set out for Syria with peaceable words. Because Antioch is in what? Syria. Syria and Iraq. Border Syria, Iraq. So he set out for Syria with peaceable words. And the people of the cities opened their gates to him and went to meet him. For Alexander the king had commanded them to meet him, since he was Alexander's father-in-law. But when Ptolemy entered the cities, he stationed forces as a garrison in each city. And when he approached Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon burned down, and Azotus and its suburbs destroyed. Remember, Jonathan tore that place up. And the corpses lying about, and the charred bodies of those whom Jonathan had burned in the war, for they had piled them in heaps along his route. So the king of Egypt, seeing what Jonathan did, oh, he burned up the villages and all these dead bodies everywhere. He's like, man. Verse 5 says, they also told the king what Jonathan had done, to throw blame on him, but the king kept silent. He had to, because remember, the king set him on his side and said, man, no man should bring an accusation against him or trouble him in any way. So he had no choice but to keep silent. It says, Jonathan met the king at Joppa with pomp, and they greeted one another and spent the night there. And Jonathan went with the king as far as the river called Lutherus, and then he returned to Jerusalem. So King Ptolemy gained control of the coastal cities as far as Seleucia by the sea, and he kept devising evil designs against Alexander. And he sent envoys to Demetrius the king, saying, come, let us make a covenant with each other. So the king of Egypt, King Ptolemy of Egypt, he wanted to go against the Romans. After he done gave his daughter Cleopatra to him, he wanted to go against the Romans because he wanted the Roman kingdom. So he wanted to make a covenant with the Greeks, the son of Demetrius, who wanted to make war with the Israelites and got their butt whooped, apparently. So this is a mess. This is already becoming a mess. It says, and I will give you in marriage my daughter, whom Alexander's wife, and you shall reign over your father's kingdom. So he wanted to renege on the deal. He wanted to give Cleopatra back to the Greeks, so they can reign over their father's kingdom. Man. It says, for I now regret that I gave him my daughter, for he has tried to kill me. Verse 11, he says, he threw blame on Alexander because he coveted his kingdom. Now, y'all say, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor. Thy neighbor's thing. It says, so he took his daughter away from him and gave her to Demetrius. And he was estranged from Alexander, and their enmity became manifest. So their hatred for each other became manifest. It says, but then Ptolemy entered Antioch and put on the crown of Asia. So he entered into Syria. The king of Egypt entered into Syria and Antioch and put on the crown of Asia. Thus he put two crowns upon his head, the crown of Egypt and that of Asia. Now Alexander the king was in Cilicia at that time, because the people of the region were in revolt. And Alexander heard of it and came against him in battle. And Ptolemy marched out to meet him with a strong force to put him to flight. So Alexander fled into Arabia to find protection there. So the Roman king Alexander, he flew into what? Into Arabia, into Saudi Arabia. Okay, to find protection there. And the king Ptolemy was exalted. And Zabdal, the Arab, cut off the head of Alexander and sent it to Ptolemy. Ooh, man. 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 So, them Arabs, they got a hold of King Alexander. He went down there to find protection, ended up chopping his head smooth off. And sent it to the king of Egypt. But King Ptolemy died 3 days later. And his troops in the strongholds were killed by the inhabitants of the strongholds. So Alexander, King Alexander, received a what? Because we know the kingdom of Rome is the fourth kingdom. So what happened to the King Alexander? He had his head chopped off. He received that grievous head wound. He received that great grievous head wound. And he said, when that fourth kingdom rise again in our time, which is already rising up, it's going to be healed. King Alexander got his head chopped off. King of Rome. Roman Empire. That's the grievous head wound. It says, so Demetrius, verse 19 says, so Demetrius became king in the 167th year. And in those days, Jonathan assembled the men of Judea to attack the citadel in Jerusalem. It says, and he built many engines of war to use against it. But certain lawless men who hated their nation went to the king and reported to him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. It says, and when he heard this, he was angry. And as soon as he heard it, he set out and came to Ptolemais. And he wrote Jonathan not to continue the siege, but to meet him for a conference at Ptolemais as quickly as possible. So, and when the son of Demetrius, King Demetrius became king, Jonathan went down there, assembled some men together in Judea to attack the citadel in Jerusalem. Which we should know that was going to happen anyway. Okay? He wanted them gone. He wanted them Greeks up out of there. So, in verse 23 it says, when Jonathan heard this, he gave orders to continue the siege. And he chose some of the elders of Israel and some of the priests and put himself in danger. For he went to the king at Timaeus, taking silver and gold and clothing and numerous other gifts. And he won his favor, although certain lawless men of the nation kept making complaints against him. You remember the king wasn't supposed to hear no complaints, right? King of Egypt wasn't supposed to hear no complaints about the Israelites. So, verse 26 says, the king treated him as his predecessors had treated him. He exalted him in the presence of all his friends. And he confirmed him in the high priesthood, and in many other honors, as he had formerly had, and made him to be regarded as one of his chief friends. Verse 28 says, then Jonathan asked the king to free Judea and 3 districts of Samaria from tribute, and he promised him 300 talents. Now the kings consented and wrote a letter to Jonathan about all these things. Its consents were as follows. Verse 30 says, King Demetrius to Jonathan, his brother, and to the nation of the Jews. Greeting. This copy of the letter which we wrote concerning you to Lasthines, our kinsman, we have written to you also, so that you may know what it says. King Demetrius to Lasthines, his father, greeting. To the nation of the Jews who are our friends and fulfill their obligation to us, we have determined to do good because of the good will they show towards us. So at one point, before, you know, at one point before the Hamites sold us to all the nations that helped scatter us, you know, to the four corners of the earth, we, you know, the Israelites was in good terms with them. It was in good terms with them. But hey, let's see what happened then. Let's go. It says, verse 34 says, we have confirmed as their possession both the territory of Judea and the three districts of Ephraim and Lydia and Rothaman. The latter, with all the region bordering them, were added to Judea from Samaria. Okay. To all those who offer sacrifice in Jerusalem, we have granted release from the royal taxes, which the king formerly received from them each year, from the crops of the land and the fruits of the trees. So, in other words, the tithes. The tithes. And the Greeks have received the royal taxes from the tithes, from the house of Israel. Of what? Each year, of the crops of the land, fruits of the tree. It says, and other payments henceforth due to us of the tithes, and the taxes due to us, and the salt pits, and the crown taxes due to us. From all these we shall grant them release. So in other words, the king of Egypt, wrote to Demetrius and them, telling them basically, hey, y'all need to let all these taxes and tithes go. And let all these taxes and tithes go. Verse 36, it says, and not one of these grants shall be canceled from this time forth forever. It says, now therefore take care to make copy of this, and let it be given to Jonathan, and put up in a conspicuous place on the holy mountain. It says, now when Demetrius the king saw that the land was quiet before him, and that there was no opposition to him, he dismissed all his troops, each man to his own place, except the foreign troops, which he had recruited from the islands of the nations. It says, so all the troops who had served his fathers hated him. It says, now Trypho had formerly been one of Alexander's supporters. He saw that all the troops were murmuring against Demetrius. So he went to Melchior, the Arab, who was bringing up Antiochus, the young son of Alexander, and insistently urged him to hang Antiochus over to him, to become king in the place of his father. And he reported to Melchior what Demetrius had done, and told of the hatred which the troops of Demetrius had for him. And he stayed there many days. Now Jonathan sent to Demetrius the king the request that he remove the troops from the citadel from Jerusalem, and the troops in the strongholds, for they kept fighting against Israel. And Demetrius sent the message to Jonathan, not only will I do these things for you and your nation, but I will confer great honor on you and your nation if I find an opportunity. It says, and now then, you will do well to send me men who will help me, for all my troops have revolted. So he said, I'll do this for you if I find the opportunity, and I'll get around to it. But in the meanwhile, send me some of your men, because mine is tripping. So verse 44, it says, so Jonathan sent 3,000 stalwart men to him at Antioch, And when they came to the king rejoiced at their arrival. It says, then the men of the city assembled within the city to the number of 120,000, and they wanted to kill the king. But the king fled into the palace. And then the men of the city besieged the main streets of the city and began to fight. So the king called the Jews to his aid, and they all rallied about him, and then spread out through the city, and they killed on that day as many as 100,000 men. Man. It says they set fire to the city and seized much spoil on that day, and they saved the king. It says when the men of the city saw that the Jews had gained control of the city as they pleased, their courage failed, and they cried out to the king with this entreaty: grant us peace and make the Jews stop fighting against us and our city. So grant us peace and make them Jews stop fighting us. Man. It says, and they threw down their arms and made peace. So the Jews gained glory in the eyes of the king and all the people of his kingdom, and they returned to Jerusalem with much spoil. So Demetrius the king sat on the throne of his kingdom, and the land was quiet before him. And he broke his word. It says, but he broke his word. You should have known that. It says, but he broke his word about all that he had promised. And he became estranged from Jonathan, and did not repay the favors which Jonathan had done him, but oppressed him greatly. So that's why Yah said in the book of Ecclesiastes, you're not supposed to trust your enemies. Don't trust your enemies. Don't even feed them. Because if you feed them, you trust them, you're gonna set them up above you, and they're gonna seek to kill you. He should have known not to trust them Greeks. So once again, they come crying for his help, and then they backstab them again. And that's a lesson we gotta learn today. What they say? Don't worry about it. Forget about it. We made peace with y'all. We gave y'all civil rights. So y'all ain't got nothing to worry about, nothing to fear. And what they do? They still what? Oppress us and kill us all the day long. Talking about some peace, when there's no peace. And we steady marching talking about no justice, no peace. The Israelites ain't did none of that. They ain't trust them from the beginning. Especially after this time. They ain't trust a word they say. Now it says, verse 54, it says, after this, Trypho returned, and with him the young boy Antiochus, who began to reign and put on the crown. And all the troops that Demetrius had cast off gathered around him, and they fought against Demetrius, and he fled and was routed. So now Demetrius running high and tail. Now they got to deal with the son of King Antiochus. Man, the same Antiochus who was the Antichrist of the first time. This ain't gonna end well. It says, Trypho captured the elephants and gained control of Antioch. So he had gained control of Syria, Antioch. Okay, and then it says, then the young Antiochus, from his father Antiochus Ephraim, wrote to Jonathan saying, I confirm you in high priesthood and set you over the 4 districts and make you one of the friends of the king. It says, he sent him gold plate and a table service, and granted him the right to drink from gold cups and dress in purple and wear a gold buckle. And Simon his brother he made governor from the ladder of Tyre to the borders of Egypt. So from Tyre and Sidon to the borders of Egypt, along the coastline. Okay. It says, then Jonathan set forth and traveled beyond the river and among the cities, and all the army of Syria gathered to him as allies. And when he came to Ashkelon, the people of the city met him and paid him honor. From there he departed to Gaza, but the men of Gaza shut him out. Gaza, off the Gaza Strip, Gaza, okay, with the Palestinians and all them running around that now. But they shut him out. It says, so he besieged it and burned its suburbs with fire and plundered them. It says, then the people of Gaza pleaded with Jonathan, and he made peace with them, and took the sons of their rulers as hostages, and sent them to Jerusalem. And he passed through the country as far as Damascus. As far as Damascus. It says, then Jonathan heard that the officers of Demetrius had come to Kadesh in Galilee with a large army, intending to remove him from office. So they had trusted Demetrius. Demetrius was trying to kill him in the first place. He said he went to meet him. But but left his brother Simon in the country. And Simon encamped before Bethzor and fought against it for many days and hemmed in it. And then they asked him to grant them terms of peace, and he did so. And he removed from there and took possession of the city and set a garrison over. Now Jonathan and his army encamped by the waters of Gennesaret. Early in the morning they marched to the plain of Hazor. And behold, the army of the foreigners met him in the plain, and they had set an ambush against him in the mountains. But they themselves met him face to face. It says, then the men in the ambush emerged from their places and joined battle. And all the men with Jonathan fled, and not one of them was left except Mattathias, the son of Absalom, and Judas, the son of Calphi, commanders of the forces of the army. And Jonathan rent his garments and put dust on his head and prayed. So in other words, they got ambushed. They got ambushed. They shouldn't have trusted in Demetrius' word, man. They got ambushed. And all the men, the Israelites fled, pretty much. The men of Jonathan fled. And not one of them was left except Mattathias, the son of Absalom, and Judas, the son of Calphi. So Jonathan rent his clothes and put dust on his head and prayed. It says, and then he turned back to the battle against the enemy and routed them, and they fled. And when his men who were fleeing saw this, they returned to him and joined him in the pursuit as far as Kadesh to their camp. And there they encamped. And it says, as many as 3,000 of the foreigners fell that day. And Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. Jonathan wasn't no punk, man. But man, so he took a loss that day, but hey, he got back up and went again at him. And they rolled, and the people, and some of the other people joined with him and made them flee. So he went back on to Jerusalem. And we're going to leave it there because, yeah, we start on 1 Maccabees chapter 12 next week, next Sunday. I think I'm going to do one more video today. What I said I was going to do yesterday, but if the Lord, and you know, if y'all say the same, but I had stuff to do. So we're going to get into this, I think I might do it here in a minute. If not, when the sun stops beaming, because the sun's starting to come out now. Go over Gog and Magog in the Bible. Very interesting. Talking about this war of Gog and Magog, this World War III that's on the hills. So you hear them talking about World War III in the news all day long with all these countries acting the fool. And we're going to read and see what the Bible say what's going to happen in this. That's what I was talking about. We're going to be burying bodies for years. We'll be burying bodies for like 7 months and burning weapons for 7 years. It's going to be ugly. When Yehoshua will come back with his chariots of fire and scorch of fire on the land against our enemies, and he say the Israelites, they're gonna be putting their fist upon their enemies. Hey, it ain't gonna be no joke. It's gonna be a bloodbath down here. That's what he said. He said my garment's gonna be soaked. He's gonna be soaked red with the wine press. His garments, he gonna go down to Edom and soak his garments red with the wine press. So y'all ain't forgot about all this stuff all these countries did to us. Sold us into captivity, slavery, took us out of our land. He ain't forgot. That's why he said when I come back, it's going to be a bloodbath. So if you ain't accepted the name of Yah, because the name of Yah is what's going to save you. The name of Yah, Yehoshua, the name of his son, he said, I come in my father's name. Okay? We know that JC wasn't his name. Okay? We know that JC wasn't his name. Okay? So if you want to be saved, you need to be saved in the name of Yehoshua. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which the name of the Holy Spirit is the Ruach HaKodesh. So that's that extra oil that the 5 wise virgins had trimmed to their lamp. Because remember, all of them were virgins. The 5 wise, 5 foolish. The 5 foolish, they didn't want to believe in the name of Yah. They didn't want to believe in the name of the son, Yehoshua. Okay? And they was 5 foolish. Okay? And they got left behind. You say, hey. That's what he said. With our ignorance, he winked at it. In our ignorance, we called him and his son after the names that the slave masters gave us. Okay? But before then, about 500 years ago, the Israelites, the Hebrews, they ain't know nothing about no Jesus. They ain't know nothing about no name of Jesus. They knew that his name was Yehoshua. His name was Yeshua. And they knew the name of God was Yah or Yahuwah. Okay? So you just think about it. Sit back and think about it. Because it's been about 490 years now since we've been cast out into captivity. Okay? It's been over 400 years. It's been about 490 years. So, if you do the math, 490, 500, and you know when we went into captivity, that was the name they came at us with, because they wanted to translate it from Latin to English. And when it was the same Latin and English and Greeks who sold us into captivity in the first place, we get back to your Hebrew roots, man, so we can go home. Because it's going to be a bloodbath. When y'all come, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be a bloodbath. He already said it's going to be a bloodbath. He said we're going to be working continually. We're going to get into it. I'm going to show it to you what it says in the scriptures, because we're going to get into that. Because I think people got this false narrative that, you know, when we see Yah coming in the cloud, all his glory, then we just gonna be like, up out of here, and then we're gonna be chilling and dwelling in peace and safety and all that, and it's all gonna be good. And you know, and Yah's just gonna judge everybody and send them on to hell and send those to heaven who he send to heaven. But before that, their flesh got to what? Die. He said it's gonna be a bloodbath. He said the birds gonna be eating food. He said that all of the birds of the air are going to have a feast on human bodies. You hear me, bro? Hey, this is going to be a bloodbath. So, if I were you, if you fear Yah, if you fear God like you say, you better call him by his name. Hey, you better start calling by his name. You better start calling Yehoshua by his name. So he said when Yehoshua comes, he coming with a sword. He coming to slay folks. He coming to slay. Man. Hey, I don't want to be on his bad side. I would be like the 5 wise virgins and got that extra oil, which is wisdom and understanding. And wisdom and knowledge come from what? The fear of Elohim, the fear of God, whose name is Yah. That's why they say hallelujah. Hallelujah means praise be to Yah. So why we call him God? It says praise be to Yah in the highest name. Come on, man. But anyway, man, we're going to get into that. I think I'm going to roll into that. Let me get this other video off and then roll into that. Get that out the way today. But y'all have a blessed day. Shalom, man. Please pick up that Apocrypha, man, and start reading it for yourself. Very interesting stuff. Help you understand what really went on in our history and what's coming. Because there's some stuff in this book that's coming that you need to know about. Especially concerning the last days and judgment and all the other stuff. So, you know, if you don't never pick up the book and read it, you ain't gonna never know. Don't be scared. Hey, when he comes, ain't no time to be scared. We know a lot of people gonna be scared, cause he said when he comes, he said men's heart gonna be failing them for fear when they see y'all coming in the cloud with that sword and all them soldiers on them white horses slaying up people. Hey, he said men's heart gonna be failing them for fear. Man, and people gonna be put to shame. He said, I'm gonna make the heathen know. He said, I'm gonna make the heathen know that I sent Israel into captivity, and they've been there this whole time. Oh man, hey, so we gonna get into that. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. We gonna get into that. But y'all have a blessed day. Shalom. Let me get off of this one. We can get on next. Shalom.